The massive station hung in space like a jewel made of metal and light. It orbited a planet called Terminus Prime, far from Earth and far from anything humans called home. Inside the station, thousands of alien species walked the corridors, spoke in strange languages, and conducted business that shaped the galaxy. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, and today humans had come asking for a seat at the table. Jay stood in the arrival bay, watching his breath form small clouds in the cold air. He looked ordinary for a human. Gray hair touched his temples. Lines marked his face around his eyes and mouth. He wore a simple dark suit that Earth diplomats favored. Nothing about him suggested power or danger. He looked like someone's uncle, perhaps a teacher or a bookkeeper. That was exactly how he wanted to appear. Behind him, Juan checked his weapons for the third time. The military attaché was young, strong, and nervous. This was his first mission off Earth, and everything here made him uneasy. The aliens were too tall or too short. Some had too many eyes. Others had no eyes at all. The air smelled wrong, tasted wrong, felt wrong against his skin. "Relax," Jay said without turning around. His voice was gentle, almost musical. "We are guests here. They will not harm us. You sure about that, sir?" Juan asked. He had heard stories about what happened to some human explorers who ventured too far from Earth. Jay smiled, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. "I am sure about very little, Juan, but I am sure about this." Yuna approached them with a tablet in her hands. The communications officer looked tired. She had been translating alien messages for 12 hours straight. "The council will see us in 1 hour," she reported. "They are not enthusiastic about our presence." "They never are when young species come knocking," Jay replied. He started walking toward the main hall, his steps slow and measured. Juan and Yuna followed. The corridors of the station were enormous. Ceilings stretched high above them, decorated with lights that shifted colors like living things. Aliens of every description moved past the human delegation. Some stared openly at the humans. Others pretended not to notice them at all. A few whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or wind or breaking glass. Jay noticed everything. He saw how some aliens stepped away from him as he passed. He saw how others shivered without knowing why. He saw fear in eyes that had never seen a human before. This did not surprise him. Some part of every living thing recognized what he truly was, even when he wore this disguise of flesh and bone. They reached the memorial garden an hour before the council meeting. Yuna wanted to review their presentation. Juan wanted to scout security exits, but Jay insisted on walking among the monuments. The garden was beautiful in a sad way. Crystalline trees grew toward artificial sunlight. Water flowed in streams that defied gravity, and everywhere monuments rose from the ground, each one dedicated to a species that no longer existed. Jay stopped at the first monument. It was made of black stone, carved with symbols that had not been read in 10,000 years. He placed his hand on the cold surface and whispered something in a language older than human civilization. Then he moved to the next monument and the next, speaking to each one in turn. Yuna watched from a distance. Something about the scene disturbed her deeply. Jay knew the names of these dead civilizations. He spoke their languages. He mourned them with a sadness that seemed older than stars. When he finally finished and returned to them, his eyes were wet with tears he did not bother to hide. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked. "I knew them," Jay said simply. "I was there when they ended. I am always there." Before Yuna could ask what he meant, alarms chimed throughout the garden. It was time for the council meeting. The council chamber was the largest room Juan had ever seen. It stretched in a perfect circle, with seats rising in tiers like an ancient amphitheater. Each seat held a different species, a different civilization, a different history spanning millennia. At the center of it all, on a raised platform of pure white crystal, sat Council Prime Vextor. The crystalline being refracted light into rainbows that danced across the walls. The human delegation took their assigned place at the speaking platform. They looked very small in that vast space, very young, very fragile. Ambassador Krelmoth spoke first, and his words were not kind. The reptilian diplomat rose from his seat, his scales catching the light like polished copper. "We gather to address the application of Earth," he began, his voice dripping with contempt. "A species barely 500 years into space travel, a species that has not yet unified its own planet. A species that wages war on itself with alarming frequency. Other council members murmured agreement. Some nodded. A few laughed. Jay listened without expression. When Krelmoth finally finished his speech listing every human failing and shortcoming, Jay stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture dramatically. He simply spoke, and somehow every being in that enormous chamber heard him clearly. "You are correct, Ambassador Krelmoth," Jay said. "Humans are young. We are fractured. We have made terrible mistakes. But youth does not equal worthlessness. Our short lives teach us to value every moment. Our conflicts teach us the cost of peace. We build monuments to remember our dead. We write poetry about endings. We create beauty from mortality itself." He paused, and in that pause, shadows seemed to gather around him. The temperature dropped slightly. Some council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Every species in this chamber was once young," Jay continued. "Every civilization started small and afraid and uncertain. You were granted chances to grow. We ask only for the same opportunity." Jay spoke for 20 minutes. He quoted philosophers from Earth and from alien worlds. He referenced histories that some council members thought were secret. He spoke with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone who looked barely middle-aged. By the time he finished, even Krelmoth looked unsettled. Council Prime Vextor called for a vote. The result came quickly. Earth's application was denied by a margin of 300 votes to 70. The decision was final. "Thank you for your consideration," Jay said politely. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "We will depart immediately." But as the human delegation turned to leave, Ambassador Krelmoth rose again. "Not so fast," he hissed. His eyes gleamed with malice. "I think these humans need to learn their place in the galaxy. Guards, teach them some humility." 20 armed guards emerged from side doors. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They surrounded the humans, cutting off all exits. Juan reached for his weapon, but Jay placed a gentle hand on his arm. "No," Jay said softly. His eyes had changed. They were darker now, deeper, like looking into wells that had no bottom. "Let them come." The guards advanced, weapons raised, and the lights in the council chamber began to flicker and die. The first shot hit Juan in the chest before anyone could react. The young soldier collapsed with a scream, his body convulsing from the neural disruptor blast. Yuna caught him as he fell, her hands shaking as she tried to shield him with her own body. The guards laughed at her attempt. They raised their weapons again, aiming at all 3 humans. "Wait," Council Prime Vextor shouted from his platform. "This violates every law we have. Stop this immediately." The guards ignored him. They took orders from Krelmoth, and the reptilian ambassador watched the scene with satisfaction. He had planned this carefully. The attack would be blamed on overzealous security. By the time anyone investigated properly, the humans would be dead and Earth would have no proof of conspiracy. It was clean. It was simple, except nothing went as planned. Jay still stood calmly in the center of the chamber. He had not moved when Juan fell. He had not flinched when the guards surrounded them. He simply stood there, watching the armed aliens with eyes that had grown completely black. The whites were gone. The pupils were gone. Only darkness remained, deep and absolute. A guard fired directly at Jay's head. The energy bolt was set to kill, designed to burn through flesh and bone in an instant. But the bolt never reached him. It simply vanished 3 inches from his body, disappearing as if it had never existed. The guard fired again. Same result. Another guard joined him, then another. 6 weapons fired at once, and 6 deadly bolts ceased to exist before touching Jay. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Frost formed on the walls. The water in the decorative fountains froze solid. Aliens in the upper seats wrapped themselves in whatever warmth they could find. Their breath came out in white clouds. Some began to shake uncontrollably, though not entirely from cold. A primal fear crept through the chamber, touching every living thing present. Jay spoke, and his voice was wrong. It was layered, as if dozens of people spoke at once in perfect unison. Old voices and young voices. Male and female. Human and alien. All of them together. All of them coming from Jay's mouth. "Do you know who I am?" he asked the guards. The guards looked at each other nervously. Their weapons lowered slightly. One of them, braver or more foolish than the rest, snarled a response. "You are just a human. Just meat." No, Jay interrupted gently. "I am the end of all things. I am the final breath. I am the darkness that waits at the close of every story. I have walked beside every being that has ever lived, from the first single cell to the mightiest civilization. I walk beside them still in the place beyond life. His appearance began to change. The gray hair remained, but his skin grew pale, almost translucent. The shadows around him deepened and spread across the floor like spilled ink. When he moved, after images trailed behind him showing glimpses of other forms he had worn over eons, 1,000 faces flickered in and out of existence around him. Ambassador Krellmoth stumbled backward, his copper scales rattling in terror. He finally understood what he had done. He had ordered an attack on death itself. "No," Krellmoth whispered. "No, this cannot be real. You are using technology, tricks, human lies." Jay turned to look at him, and the ambassador's words died in his throat. Every instinct in Krellmoth's ancient brain screamed at him to run, to hide, to beg for mercy. He tried to move his legs, but found himself frozen in place. An invisible force held him like an insect in amber. "I do not lie," Jay said in that terrible layered voice. "I have never needed to lie. I simply am as I have always been, as I will always be. I am the promise made to every living thing from the moment of its birth." Council Prime Vextor descended from his platform on shaking limbs. The crystalline being had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed supernovas and the birth of new stars, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for this moment. "You are truly Death?" Vextor asked, his voice barely audible. "I am," Jay confirmed. He looked down at Juan, who still writhed in pain on the floor. Yuna held him, tears streaming down her face. Jay knelt beside them, and as he moved, the temperature around the humans warmed slightly. "But first, let me help your friend." Jay placed his hands on Juan's chest. The young soldier gasped as the pain began to leave his body. Black lines of agony flowed from his wounds into Jay's hands, where they dissolved into nothing. In seconds, Juan was breathing normally again. The neural damage that should have crippled him for life was simply gone. "I do not take life," Jay explained, standing again. "That is a common misunderstanding. I do not cause death. I merely guide the transition when the time comes naturally. But it was not this man's time. It was not time for any of you." He walked to the nearest guard who had been injured when Juan fired back in defense. The alien soldier cringed away, but Jay simply healed his burns with the same gentle touch. He moved through the chamber, helping everyone who had been hurt, friend and enemy alike. The council members watched in stunned silence. Death was showing mercy. Death was showing compassion. It contradicted everything they thought they knew about the universe. General Thaxaron burst into the chamber with reinforcements, weapons ready. The military commander took in the scene instantly. Injured guards, frozen diplomats, and in the center of it all, a human who was clearly not human at all. Thaxaron was old enough and wise enough to know when to lower his weapon. "Council Prime, what has happened here?" Thaxaron demanded. Vextor struggled to find words. "Ambassador Krellmoth ordered an attack on the human delegation. We have just learned that the human diplomat, Jay, is actually... He is death, the end of all life." Thaxaron's four eyes widened. He looked at Jay, really looked at him, and saw the truth. Every soldier knew death. They had seen him on battlefields, watching from the shadows. Some claimed to have glimpsed him in their worst moments. Now he stood before them wearing human skin, and the sight of it made Thaxaron's blood run cold. Jay finished healing the last injured guard and turned to face the assembled council. His appearance had mostly returned to normal, but his eyes remained dark and infinite. When he spoke, his voice was his own again, but it carried weight that seemed to press down on everyone present. "I came to this council as a diplomat because I wanted to see if the greater galaxy deserved humanity," Jay said. "I have walked with humans since their species first discovered fire. I have guided their dead since the beginning. And in all my eternal existence across countless worlds and civilizations, humans were the first to make death beautiful." He gestured to the memorial garden visible through the chamber's windows. "They build monuments to remember. They write poetry about endings. They find meaning in mortality. When I walk among them, they do not always fear me. Sometimes they welcome me as an old friend. They understand what so many ancient species have forgotten." Jay's gaze swept across the council members, and each one felt seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in their lives. "You attacked not just a diplomat today. You attacked the one constant in all existence. Now you will face consequences." Ambassador Krellmoth finally found his voice. "Please," he begged. "I did not know. I could not have known. Have mercy. Mercy, Jay repeated softly. You showed none to us. You planned this attack before we ever arrived. You meant to kill all 3 humans and blame it on an accident. General Thaxron, check the station's security recordings. You will find the proof. Thaxron immediately ordered his soldiers to investigate. Jay turned back to the Council Prime. I will give you 3 days, Jay announced. 3 of your days to decide humanity's fate again. Vote with wisdom this time. Vote with honesty. Because if you reject Earth again out of fear or prejudice, I will withdraw from this galaxy entirely. Without me to guide souls to what comes next, the natural order will collapse. Spirits will wander lost. Your dead will linger in agony between life and whatever waits beyond. Think carefully about your choice. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted questions. Some demanded proof. Others simply panicked. But Jay had said all he needed to say. He helped Juan to his feet, nodded to Yuna, and walked toward the exit. As they left, one voice rose above the chaos. It belonged to an ancient being in the furthest tier of seats, someone who had been silent throughout the entire proceeding. I knew, the voice called out. I suspected for years. The legend spoke of him. Death walks among us, and we have been fools. The doors closed behind the humans, leaving the Galactic Council to face the truth of what they had done. The human delegation returned to their quarters under heavy guard. But this time the guards were there for protection, not imprisonment. General Thaxron had taken personal command of their security after reviewing the station's recordings. The evidence was damning. Krellmoth and 6 other council members had planned the attack for weeks. They had wanted war with Earth, seeing humanity as weak prey to be exploited. Juan sat on his bunk, still shaken from his brush with death. Yuna brought him water and sat beside him. Neither of them spoke. What could they say? Their diplomatic escort was death itself. The being they had traveled with for 3 months, shared meals with, laughed with, was the end of all life in the universe. Jay stood by the window, looking out at the stars. He had returned to his normal appearance completely, just a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes. But now Juan and Yuna could see past the disguise. They noticed how still he stood, barely breathing. They saw how shadows clung to him, even in bright light. They felt the cold that radiated from his presence. You have questions, Jay said without turning around. Ask them. Yuna spoke first, her voice trembling. How long have you been... what you are? Since the beginning, Jay replied. Since the first living thing drew breath and then stopped breathing. I was there. I have always been there. I will be there at the end of the universe itself when the last star dies. But you look human, Juan said. You act human. You eat food, you sleep, you... I chose to be human, Jay interrupted gently. He turned to face them and his expression was sad. Or rather, I chose to walk among humans in this form. I have worn many shapes over eons. I have been the shadow at the edge of vision for 1,000 species. But humans were different. They made me want to understand them better. He sat down across from them, moving slowly, giving them time to adjust. Most species fear death absolutely. They fight it with every breath. They rage against the dying light. But humans? Humans write poems about autumn leaves falling. They compose music about saying goodbye. They build museums to remember those who came before. You do not just accept death. You make it meaningful. You make it beautiful. Jay smiled, and for a moment he looked genuinely happy. When I first walked among humans, it was in ancient times when your species barely understood fire. I expected the same fear I found everywhere else in the galaxy. Instead, I found art, story, ritual. A woman whose child had died planted flowers on the grave and sang songs to keep his memory alive. A warrior facing his end composed a poem about cherry blossoms. An old woman welcomed me like an expected guest, offering tea before she passed. Yuna wiped tears from her eyes. So you fell in love with us? In a way, Jay admitted. I became fascinated. I started appearing more often on Earth, watching how humans faced mortality. Every culture had different rituals, different beliefs, but all of them found meaning in the end. You are the only species that made me feel less alone. Before they could respond, a hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. Bora, Earth's intelligence director, appeared. The stern woman looked exhausted. I see you revealed yourself, she said to Jay. The whole galaxy knows now. It is spreading across every communication channel. They attacked us, Jay said simply. I had no choice. I know, Bora replied. I have reviewed the evidence General Thaxron sent us. Krelmuth and his conspirators will face justice. But Jay, you need to understand what you have done. You have terrified every civilization in the galaxy. They are panicking. Some want to accept Earth immediately. Others want to reject us and hope you leave them alone. A few are planning to attack us, thinking they can kill you before you kill them. Jay stood abruptly. I have never killed anyone. I have never taken a life before its natural time. They do not know that, Bora said. They only know that death walks in human skin, and we sent him to their council. They think it was a threat, a show of power. It was not, Jay insisted, frustration creeping into his voice. I volunteered for this mission because I wanted to see if the greater galaxy had the same wisdom about mortality that humans do. I wanted to see if they deserved to know humanity. The answer disappointed me. A new voice joined the conversation. Perhaps I can provide context. A different hologram appeared, this one showing an ancient alien with skin like weathered paper and eyes that glowed with inner light. I am historian Sindel. I have studied galactic history for 900 years. I suspected what you were, Jay. The legend spoke of you. Sindel gestured and images filled the air around him. Ancient texts from dozens of extinct civilizations. Cave paintings showing a shadowy figure leading souls. Stone tablets describing a walker between worlds. Every culture has stories of death, the historian explained. But most civilizations lost these stories as they advanced. They forgot the old wisdom. They began to see death only as an enemy to defeat with technology and medicine. More images appeared. Medical facilities where aliens were kept alive for centuries in agony. Prisons where criminals were given immortality as punishment, forced to live forever with their guilt. War machines designed to deny the enemy even the mercy of dying. The Galactic Council has become afraid of endings, Sindel continued. We extend life far beyond its natural span. We resurrect the dead with technology. We do anything to avoid facing mortality. In doing so, we have lost something important. We have forgotten how to die with dignity. Jay nodded slowly. That is what I saw when I walked these stations. Ancient beings clinging to existence long after their time. Species that no longer reproduce because they no longer die. Civilizations stagnant for millennia because change requires endings and beginnings. And then humans arrived, Sindel said with something like approval in his voice. Young, vibrant, dying after barely a century but accomplishing more in their short lives than some species do in thousands of years. You frightened us, not because you were violent or aggressive, but because you reminded us of what we lost. The historian's image flickered. I have spent my life studying the dead. I believe you, Jay. When you say you do not take life, I believe you guide souls to whatever comes next. And I think the Council needs to hear the truth from someone they trust. Will they listen? Yuna asked. Some will, Sindel replied. Others will not. Fear is a powerful force, but I must try. We all must try. Over the next day, the station descended into controlled chaos. General Thaxron's investigation revealed the full scope of Krelmuth's conspiracy. The reptilian ambassador and his co-conspirators were arrested and stripped of their positions. Evidence showed they had planned to use the diplomatic incident as justification for seizing Earth's resources. The plot had been years in the making. Meanwhile, historian Sindel presented his research to the Council. He showed them the ancient texts. He explained the legends that appeared across every civilization. He argued that Jay was not a threat, but a fundamental force of nature, no more evil than gravity or time. Some council members listened. Others refused to believe. Arguments broke out in the chambers. Civilizations threatened to leave the council if Earth was accepted. Other civilizations threatened to leave if Earth was rejected. The galaxy stood on the edge of something unprecedented. Through it all, Jay waited quietly in his quarters. He tended to Juan's lingering aches. He spoke with Yuna about philosophy and poetry. He seemed almost human again, except for those moments when his gaze grew distant and sad, as if seeing something far beyond the present moment. On the second night, Jay received an unexpected visitor. Council Prime Vextor arrived personally, without guards or ceremony. The crystalline being stood in the doorway, light refracting through his body in nervous patterns. May I speak with you? Vextor asked. Of course, Jay replied. He gestured to a chair. Though I fear I know what you will ask. Vextor sat carefully. I have led this council for 300 years. I have made countless decisions, some wise, some foolish. But I have never faced a choice like this one. Do you truly mean your threat? Will you abandon this galaxy if we reject humanity? Jay was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with sorrow. It is not a threat. It is simply truth. I have grown tired, Vextor. Tired of guiding species that fear and hate me. Tired of walking alone through the universe. Humans gave me hope. They made me feel that my purpose had meaning beyond mere function. If the galaxy rejects them out of prejudice and fear, then I will leave. The cosmic role will pass to another eventually, but for a time, perhaps a long time, the dead will wander lost. That is a terrible price, Vextor said. Yes, Jay agreed. But I will not force respect through terror. I will not make the galaxy accept humanity just because they fear me. That serves no one. Not humans, not the other species, not even me. If the Council votes again, it must be an honest vote based on humanity's actual worth. Vextor rose to leave, but paused at the door. I voted to reject Earth the first time. I thought humans were too young, too violent, too unpredictable. Now I see I was wrong. You walk among them, death itself, and they treat you with kindness. That says more about humanity than any diplomatic presentation ever could. After the Council Prime left, Yuna asked Jay what he thought would happen. I do not know, Jay admitted. I can see every ending, but I cannot see. The third day arrived with tension that could be felt throughout the station. Council members gathered in groups arguing in hushed voices. Some had not slept. Others had spent the entire night in prayer or meditation, seeking guidance from their gods or philosophies. Everyone knew that today's vote would change the galaxy forever. A new human shuttle arrived that morning. Ambassador Taeyang stepped off, followed by a small team of advisors. The senior diplomat was older than Jay appeared to be, with white hair and a face marked by years of negotiation and compromise. He had been sent by Earth's government to support the mission, but everyone knew the real reason. If this vote went badly, if violence broke out again, Taeyang would take command and get the others home safely. He met with Jay privately in the delegation's quarters. For a long moment, the two men simply looked at each other. Then Taeyang bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect. I knew, Taeyang said quietly, not at first. But over the years I began to suspect, the way you spoke of history as if you had lived it. The sadness in your eyes when discussing fallen civilizations, the fact that you never seemed to age, even in old photographs from decades ago. And yet you said nothing, Jay replied. What was there to say? Taeyang asked. You served Earth faithfully. You guided our diplomats through difficult negotiations. You mourned our dead with genuine grief. Whether you were human or something far older, you were on our side. That was enough, Jay smiled sadly. I wish the council saw it that way. They walked together to the council chamber. The massive room was packed beyond capacity. Every species had sent representatives. Even civilizations that rarely participated in council matters had sent observers. History was being made, and everyone wanted to witness it. The humans took their place at the speaking platform. This time Juan and Yuna stood tall beside Jay. They were no longer afraid. They had seen what he truly was, and they had chosen to stand with him anyway. That loyalty meant more to Jay than any vote ever could. Council Prime Vextor called the session to order. Before the vote could begin, however, a request came from the upper tiers. The Eternal Queen Risvara wished to address the council. A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. The queen had not spoken publicly in 3 centuries, the ancient being descended from her seat slowly. She had been alive for 12,000 years, kept breathing through advanced technology and genetic manipulation that pushed the boundaries of nature itself. Her body was more machine than flesh now. She moved with mechanical precision, every step requiring conscious effort. But her mind remained sharp and her authority was absolute. I wish to speak with Jay alone, the queen announced. Her voice was amplified by technology, but it still sounded weak and thin. Grant us privacy. Vextor hesitated, then cleared the chamber. Thousands of beings filed out, leaving only Jay and the queen in that vast space. Hidden cameras still recorded everything, but the queen ignored them. She approached Jay slowly, each step an effort. I am afraid, she said simply. I have been afraid for 12,000 years. That is why I cling to this half-life. Neither fully alive nor properly dead. I fear what comes after. I fear the unknown. Jay regarded her with compassion. I know. I have seen it in countless beings across the ages. The fear of ending paralyzes you all. Show me, the Queen demanded. If you are truly death, show me what waits beyond. Let me see for just a moment. Then I will know if my fear is justified. Jay hesitated. What I show you cannot be unseen. It will change you. I am already changed, the Queen replied. I am a ghost haunting my own body. Show me truth. That is all I ask. Jay reached out and touched her forehead gently. The Queen gasped as visions flooded her mind. She saw the realm beyond life, a place that defied description in mortal terms. It was not heaven or hell, not paradise or punishment. It was simply what came next. A transformation as natural as a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. She saw souls moving forward without fear, joining something vast and beautiful and indescribable. She saw her own path waiting for her, saw what she would become when she finally let go. And it was not terrible. It was not the void she feared. It was coming home after a long, exhausting journey. When Jay withdrew his hand, the Queen collapsed to her knees. Tears streamed down her ancient face. I have been such a fool, she whispered. All these thousands of years afraid of the most natural thing in existence. She stood with difficulty, but there was new strength in her movements. She called for the council to return, and they filed back in with curious and concerned expressions. The Queen stood at the central platform and made an announcement that shocked everyone present. I am deactivating my life extension technology, she declared. Tonight I will die naturally for the first time in 12 millennia. I ask Jay to guide me personally when my time comes. This is my choice, made freely and without regret. The chamber erupted in chaos. The Queen's attendants rushed forward, begging her to reconsider. Medical staff offered emergency procedures. Council members shouted questions and protests. But the Queen raised her hand for silence, and slowly the noise died down. Listen to me, she commanded, and her voice carried authority that came from 12,000 years of rule. This human, this being you fear, has shown me what we all forgot. Death is not the enemy. Fear is the enemy. Stagnation is the enemy. We have extended our lives far beyond nature's intent, and in doing so, we stopped truly living. We stopped growing, changing, evolving. She pointed at the human delegation. These people live barely a century, yet they accomplish more in their short lives than we do in thousands of years. They create urgently because they know time is limited. They love deeply because they understand it will end. They find meaning in mortality. That is not weakness. That is the greatest strength in the universe. The Queen turned to face the entire council. I vote to accept Earth's application, not because I fear death standing among them, but because humanity remembers what we forgot. They can teach us to live again by teaching us to accept ending. That is worth more than all the technology and ancient wisdom we have accumulated. She bowed to Jay with genuine respect, then walked slowly back to her seat. The chamber remained silent as her words sank in. Council Prime Vextor called for the vote. This time, when the results came in, Earth was accepted by a wide margin. 400 votes in favor, 70 against, 30 abstaining. It should have been a moment of celebration, but Jay's expression remained troubled. When Taiyang started to thank the council, Jay raised his hand. The vote changes nothing, Jay said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. You accepted humanity out of fear of me, not respect for them. Even the Queen's words, wise as they were, come from a place of terror. You saw what I could do and you voted accordingly. That is not acceptance. That is appeasement. Taiyang placed a hand on Jay's shoulder. Sometimes fear is the beginning of wisdom, the old diplomat said. They voted wrong the first time out of fear. Now they vote right also out of fear. But the result is the same. Earth has a seat at this table. What happens next is up to all of us to determine. Before Jay could respond, General Thaxron stepped forward. If I may speak, the military commander said. My investigation has revealed something important. Ambassador Krelmoth's conspiracy was larger than we thought. 17 council members were involved, planning to use Earth's rejection as justification for invasion. They saw humanity as weak prey. Thaxron projected evidence into the air, messages between conspirators, plans for military strikes, resource allocation charts showing which human cities would be targeted first. The brutality of it was shocking even to those who had supported rejecting Earth. These conspirators are being detained as we speak, Thaxron continued. They will face trial for violating every diplomatic law we have. But their plan reveals something important. They chose Earth as a target precisely because you seemed weak, young, unprotected. They did not know that death itself walked among you. He turned to face the council. Perhaps we accepted Earth out of fear, but we rejected them the first time out of arrogance. Fear and arrogance are both poor foundations for justice. Let this be a lesson. Judge species by their merits, not by their age or your assumptions about their strength. The general bowed to the human delegation, a military salute of respect. Other council members slowly rose and did the same. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough to matter. The Queen's voice rang out one final time. I have lived for 12,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wonders beyond description. But today I learned the most important lesson of my entire existence. Life is precious because it ends. Thank you, Jay, for teaching this old fool what every human child knows from birth. That evening, the Eternal Queen died peacefully in her sleep. True to his word, Jay was there to guide her. Those who were present said the Queen smiled as she passed, something she had not done in centuries. They said she looked young again, the way she must have looked 12,000 years ago before fear made her cling to existence. Jay stood by her body for a long time after she died, mourning in his own way. When Yuna found him there, he was crying silently. 3 days after the Queen's death, Jay made an announcement that sent shockwaves across the galaxy. He called a gathering in the council chamber, inviting not just council members but anyone who wished to attend. Thousands came. Some were curious. Others were afraid. All of them wanted to hear what Death would say. Jay stood alone at the central platform. He wore simple human clothing, looking more ordinary than ever. But everyone present could sense the power radiating from him now. He no longer bothered to hide what he was. Shadows moved around him even in bright light. The temperature dropped when he spoke. Every living thing in the chamber felt the weight of his presence. I have decided to leave, Jay announced. Not temporarily, not as a threat, but permanently. I will abandon the role of death and return to the void of non-existence. The cosmic function will eventually pass to another, but that transition takes time. Perhaps generations, perhaps longer. During that time, souls will wander lost between life and what comes after. The dead will linger in confusion and pain. The natural order will collapse. The chamber erupted in panic. Council members shouted questions. Some begged him to reconsider. Others accused him of cruelty for threatening such punishment. But Jay simply waited for the noise to die down before continuing. This is not punishment, he said calmly. This is exhaustion. I have walked through the universe since before your oldest civilizations drew breath. I have guided countless trillions of souls to their rest. I have done this work without complaint, without rest, without end. But I am tired. Tired of being feared. Tired of being hated for performing the most natural function in existence. Tired of walking alone through eternity. His gaze swept across the assembled beings. Humans gave me hope. They showed me that death could be honored instead of feared. They made monuments to remember. They wrote poetry about endings. They welcomed me as a necessary part of life's cycle. For the first time in my eternal existence, I felt less alone. That is why I volunteered to represent them here. Jay's voice grew heavy with sorrow. But this council accepted Earth only because you feared me. Even those who voted yes did so to appease me, not because humanity earned their respect. That is not enough. If the galaxy cannot value life without fearing death, then perhaps it needs to learn that lesson the hard way. Council Prime Vextor stepped forward. You speak as if we are incapable of change. As if we cannot learn. Give us time. Give us a chance to prove ourselves worthy of your continued service. How much time? Jay asked. A year? A century? A million years? I have already given you eons. Nothing changes. You cling to life far beyond natural limits. You refuse to let go. You treat death as a disease to be cured rather than a transition to be honored. From the upper tiers, historian Sindel stood. The ancient scholar's voice trembled with emotion. You are right to be tired. You are right to feel alone. But abandoning us serves no purpose. It only creates suffering. Stay, Jay, teach us. Show us how to face mortality with the grace that humans possess. Be not just death, but death as a teacher. Before Jay could respond, a commotion erupted at the chamber entrance. Guards attempted to stop someone, but Ambassador Krellmoth pushed through. The disgraced reptilian had been stripped of his position and was awaiting trial, but he demanded to speak. Let him approach, Jay said quietly. Krellmoth walked forward slowly, his copper scales dull with shame. He stopped several feet from Jay, unable to meet those dark, infinite eyes. I have spent these past days in detention, thinking about what I did, about what I am. I hated humans because they reminded me of my own mortality. I am old by my species standards, nearing the end of my natural life. Seeing humans embrace their brief existence with such vigor terrified me. It made my long life feel wasted. The former ambassador finally looked up at Jay. You came to me in my cell. You showed me a vision of my own death. I expected horror. I expected punishment. Instead, you showed me peace. You showed me that ending is not failure, it is completion. For the first time in decades, I am no longer afraid. Grelmoth knelt before Jay, a gesture of submission rarely seen from his proud species. I will spend my remaining years trying to undo the damage I caused. I will speak against the fear that drove me to attack you. I will tell anyone who will listen that death is not the enemy. I offer this not to escape justice, but because you gave me a gift I do not deserve. You gave me peace. Jay helped Grelmoth to his feet gently. You will face consequences for your actions. That is right and necessary. But you can still grow. You can still change. That is the beauty of mortality. While you live, transformation remains possible. The chamber watched in stunned silence as Death showed compassion to his attacker. It was a lesson more powerful than any speech. Ambassador Tai Yang stepped forward to address the council. The senior diplomat had watched these events unfold with careful attention. Now he spoke with authority earned over decades of service. This council made a choice based on fear, Tai Yang said bluntly. That is truth. But fear is not always wrong. Sometimes fear is the beginning of wisdom. You feared what you did not understand, and that fear made you act. The question now is what comes next. Will you let fear paralyze you, or will you let it motivate growth? He gestured to the human delegation behind him. Earth does not need this council's approval to thrive. We have explored the stars alone. We have built wonders without guidance from ancient civilizations. If you reject us again, we will continue forward on our own path. But we came here offering friendship, offering partnership, offering to share what we have learned about finding meaning in brief existence. Taeyang turned to Jay. You speak of leaving because the galaxy does not deserve you. Perhaps you are right. But consider this. The Queen died peacefully because you showed her truth. Grelmoth found redemption because you offered guidance. Historian Sindel has spent his life preserving stories because some part of him always believed you were real. Change is slow, especially for species that measure time in millennia. But it is happening. Yuna found the courage to speak next, her voice soft but clear. I am nobody important, just a communications officer. But I have traveled with Jay for months. I have seen him mourn at monuments to dead civilizations. I have heard him speak languages extinct for eons. I have watched him cry for species he guided to rest long before humans existed. He is tired and alone and sad, but he is also kind. He heals even his enemies. He mourns even those who hate him. She looked directly at Jay, tears streaming down her face. You say humans made you feel less alone. But do you understand what you are to us? You are the promise that death is not the end. You are the guide who ensures no one faces the final transition alone. You are proof that existence has meaning beyond what we can measure. Please do not leave us, any of us. Not humans, not aliens, not this entire galaxy. We need you, not because we fear you, but because we need to learn from you. The chamber remained silent after Yuna finished speaking. The weight of her words hung in the air. Jay stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I do not know what to do, he admitted. For the first time in my existence, I am uncertain. I have always known every ending, seen every possible path, but this is new. General Thaxron spoke up from his position near the entrance. Then perhaps that uncertainty is the answer. You say you are tired of walking alone through eternity, performing the same function without variation. Stay, but not as you were. Stay as something new. Be Death who teaches. Death who guides not just souls in their final moments, but civilizations in how they face mortality. Council Prime Vextor approached Jay carefully. We cannot undo the past. We cannot claim we voted for the right reasons, but we can commit to doing better in the future. Accept a new role among us, not as a hidden diplomat, but as what you truly are. Walk openly through our worlds. Teach us what humanity knows instinctively. Help us learn to die with grace so that we might learn to live with purpose. Jay looked at each of them in turn, the Council Prime who admitted his failures, the General who offered respect despite fear, The historian who believed when no one else did. The disgraced ambassador seeking redemption. The young human woman who saw past his cosmic nature to the loneliness beneath. I will stay, Jay said finally. But on one condition, no more hiding. No more disguises. I will walk as what I am. You will see death moving among you. Some will fear me, some will hate me, but perhaps over time some will learn to understand me. He looked at the human delegation. Earth is now a full member of this council. Let that membership be earned through your actions going forward, not through fear of me. Prove that you deserve to be here. Tae-young bowed deeply. We will. I swear it. The formal vote was held that evening, confirming Earth's membership with proper ceremony and protocols. But the real change happened in the days and weeks that followed. Jay began traveling to different worlds, speaking openly about death and the transition beyond. Some species rejected him. Others listened with growing understanding. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. The memorial garden became Jay's favorite place. He spent hours there, tending the monuments to fallen civilizations. Visitors began joining him, asking questions about the dead species, learning their stories.